That's our update. Yeah, and without further ado, I'm going to pass it on over to Eileen. And feel free to have the conversation flow if you have any questions, or if you're not familiar with her work, or if you are, just who you. Great, thank you. Hi, Eileen.
Hi, Mateo. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. Happy Sunday. Everyone hear me in the back okay?
Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay, the HDMI cable.
There it is.
There it is.
Got it.
Okay.
Don't touch the computer.
I'm stepping away. Bye.
All right. Well, great to see everyone. It's always nice to commune on Sundays with people who fall into the category of caring about our spiritual selves. And I'm just going to tell you just a little bit about my work if you're not familiar with it. Does anybody know anything about my work? Couple? Okay. So I use tuning forks. And I've been using tuning forks for 29 years now. And over the years of exploring with them, so this is a weighted tuning fork, this is an unweighted tuning fork, many things have happened. They've actually taught me quite a lot, like more than you would think, right? You think that a tuning fork is really just a tone generator, and how can it be a healing tool? And certainly, how can it be something that is so spiritually educational? But it really has been. I started using my first set of tuning forks back in 1996. I was doing massage therapy part-time. And from the very first time that I started using the tuning forks, they surprised me, okay? And it's something about being human that we actually like surprises, believe it or not. We like good surprises. Maybe there's some bad surprises we'd rather not deal with. But I think in general, our curiosity gets piqued when something doesn't behave the way we expect it to. So my first set of tuning forks was the C major scale. It was C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And back then there weren't a lot of people using tuning forks. So when I would tell people I was doing sound healing with tuning forks, and this was in Connecticut, almost 30 years ago, people were very dismissive of it because there is something about the word and about the idea that can create kind of a skeptical or like a brushing off kind of response. In fact, there are some Christians who have been taught that tuning forks are of the devil. And I always say to people who say that to me that, no, that's pitchforks. That's a different thing than tuning forks. Those have 3 prongs and these only have 2. Essentially, it's just an acoustic tone generator, and it's measured in cycles per second. So this is my favorite one right here. I'm just going to sound it so you can hear it. This is 222 hertz. And what I love about this fork is it has kind of a bell-like quality. It immediately brings you into attention, into inner quiet, right? And this is why we meditate, right? Because we want to quiet our mind. We want to be able to connect with God. And very often the worries, concerns, difficulties, to-do lists, all the things that we have to do, just sitting in meditation can be not easy to keep that kind of one-pointed focus and awareness and tuning in. And so even just sitting with something like this, immediately makes all the cells in your body pay attention. It brings you into a relaxed, aware presence. And this is the kind of place we want to live our life from, ideally. We all know the difference between talking to somebody who's really fully present and fully paying attention versus someone who is distracted or dealing with some kind of trauma. Are we showing up in our relationships with our full self? Or are we stuck in the past or worrying about the future or distracted by something? Really, the greatest gift we can give each other is the fullness of our own being and the fullness of our own attention. And so that is why we do this form of sound healing. Biofield tuning really helps us to settle into this present moment, right? Because at the end of the day, that's all we've got. That's all we've got. And we live in a culture where we get many, many inputs that make us worried about the future, that make us worried about things that we can't control. So part of us is in the future or off in our periphery, and we're not showing up. Not only not showing up for others, but we're not showing up for the fullness of our own being, right? Our own potential and the gifts that God has given us. Right? How many of you feel like you have successfully cultivated all the gifts that God has given you? Right? We all know that we have potential beyond what we're living. And what I have found working with really tens of thousands of people at this point in groups and as individuals is that we all have a yearning to expand into that full potential that we know that we have. And what the tuning forks have shown me, they've shown me a number of things. They've shown me that the body has an electrical system. Who knew that the body has an electrical system? Okay, great. Some of you do. Most of us don't learn about that, right? We've been taught to think of ourselves and life chemically and mechanically and sort of often find ourselves searching for the light, right? Searching for the light. We're wanting to connect with the light. But you are the light you seek, and it is your electrical system. Electricity beats your heart, it runs your brain waves, it's in all the water in your body, it's across all of your membranes, your bones, your blood, your fascia. Everything is conducting electrical signaling. But when you are alive, your light is on, your eyes are open, you're here. And when we die, our light goes out. Maybe, has anybody ever been with someone when they've passed and actually seen light leave the body? Yeah, I have. I saw that with I had a 220-pound English Mastiff named Jed, a dog, big dog. And when we had to have him put down, my husband and I both saw this cloud of light coming out of his body. So that's your body's electrical system. Anything that has electric current running through it has a magnetic field around it. And that's established and understood science. Our bodies are no different. So the magnetic field of the body has been called the aura or the human energy field, and science likes to pretend that it doesn't exist. Science likes to pretend that this whole idea that we have a biofield is something that's up for debate. And as someone who's worked with this for many years, I can tell you that it is absolutely a real thing. So I would say that your body's electrical system is your mind, it's your conscious mind, it's your sense of I, of self. It's your subconscious mind. It's where all your memories are stored, right? Because your memories are all electrical. Everything that you see, smell, touch, taste, feel is all being registered as an electrical impulse or signal in your body. Therefore, it makes sense that that's where your memories are stored. And that's where I find memories. I actually find memories in the magnetic field around the body, which goes completely contrary to everything that we've been taught, right? So this is some of the things that the tuning forks have revealed to me, this whole nature of mind and memory. And I would even go so far to say as what we call your biofield, your electrical system, is the same thing that we call your soul. We call your soul. And if you think about it, right, there's been some studies that have really proven reincarnation. The University of Virginia did an extensive study on children who claim to remember past lives. And they did deep documentation with these children, and they determined that there was no way that this child could have known these things unless they were remembering it on a soul level. So if your biofield is recording all of your memories, and then you take them with you when you go, and then they come back and inform the next body that you're born into. We've all seen child prodigies with extraordinary musical capabilities and other things. We're like, well, how is that even possible unless it's a soul memory, right? And we all have met and know old souls, people that you just know that they came in with a whole lot of experience. Maybe some of us have seen that in our children or our grandchildren, that they have a depth of wisdom and understanding that only makes sense if they've been here many times, right? So to me, this idea of the biofield really bridges the concept of science and spirituality. I started reading spiritual books when I was 18 because I was raised in an atheist home. And I went to a private school, very much of the sort of atheist mindset, right? Back in that era of God is dead. and we are all just machines here in this random, dark, chaotic place that's meaningless. And so I realized that couldn't be so, and I went searching for meaning. But from early on, I found this idea that there's some kind of divide between spirituality and science very troubling. I think that it is one of the bigger problems in our world, because what it does is it divides us into camps. It's a divisive perspective, because there are those of us who know God, who know our inner light, and then science tells us that it's not so. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah? Okay. So this idea that our body has an electrical system that animates our avatar, if you will, when we are alive, and then because it is made of light and cannot die, right? Light can't die. So we are eternal beings. You're eternal beings. They're, and actually no part of you really dies, right? Because you're made of water mostly. Water can't die, right? You're made of mud and minerals. You're really composed of the molecules of creation, and none of these really die. They just change form. So this idea that we have this electrical biofield that lives on, I think is very comforting. And we've certainly all had the experience of loved ones who have passed, and we have felt them, sensed them, heard them, maybe received a message from them, maybe have special animals attached to them, right? Where we really feel like we are able to communicate with people even when they're no longer in their bodies, because they still are, right? So there is a beautiful eternal quality in the biofield that absolutely transcends the individual in this part of the time-space continuum. So I just want to come back to some of the things that the tuning fork showed me that really surprised me and that led to my sort of uncovering or realizing the nature of the biofield. Well, when I got my first set of tuning forks, they came with very simple instructions. They said you use the note of C over the root chakra, if you will, D over the sacral center, E over the solar plexus, F over the heart, G, A, B. And so that's what I started doing. And I had some massage therapy clients that I asked them if they'd be willing to be guinea pigs because I had no idea what I was doing. I do want to say that lots of people have said to me over the years, I have tuning forks, but I don't know what to do with them. Okay. Does anybody have tuning forks that they don't know what to do with? All right. I didn't know what to do with them either. All right. But what may be a little bit different about me is that I'm not afraid of doing things wrong. I'm not afraid of being messy. I'm not afraid I'm just not afraid really of much. And so I was very willing, and I'm very much a scientist. I'm very curious about how things work. So I just started experimenting with them. And I'd activate the fork and I would hold it over the energy center, and then I started like moving it around the body. And in the process of moving the forks around the body, I found that the tone changed. Now, I thought it was just going to be a C. I thought it was going to be an objective output coming from the fork, and it was going to sound like a C no matter where I put it. But what I found was in certain places, the fork would go really loud. And then in other places, it would go really soft, almost like it was being like absorbed right away. In some places, it would sound like it was full of static. Or in other places, I would hear overtones very strongly, but not in a different place than I moved it to. And so that all seemed very curious to me. And when I started explaining it to friends, they were like, oh, that's the Doppler effect. Oh, that's room acoustics. And I was like, well, I understand those things, but there's something else going on here. There seems to be like a signal coming off the body that the tuning forks are interfacing with, that they are responding to and having a dialogue or a conversation with. So then I discovered that I could actually move these loud spots around with my tuning fork. Right? I was like, oh, this shoulder, it's loud, but then it's really quiet when I put it right over your heart center. So what's up with that? And I'm like, well, an energy center, like ideally, if it's an energy center, right? Everywhere we have a chakra, we have a nerve plexus. So it's part of our physiology as well. And so I found that if I put the tuning fork in the loud spot and I did what I call click, drag, and drop. And it's very much like a click, drag, and drop. So I would click into it, and then I would drag that loud spot to the middle of the body, and then I would drop it there. And then it wouldn't be loud over here anymore. It would be loud in the middle. And then people would say things to me like, wow, I feel very centered. So that was curious. I was like, well, what law of physics is dictating the fact that this tuning fork is moving these loud spots, right? Very curious thing. I remember one time working on one of my first people, and he came in and his shoulder hurt. And so I held the tuning fork over the shoulder that hurt, and it got really loud and really sharp. And then I held it over the shoulder that didn't hurt, and it just sounded normal. And he heard it, and I heard it. And so I just kept activating the fork and holding it in that area. And after a little while, I mean, just really a couple of minutes, it sounded like the other shoulder. And when he got up off the table, he rotated his arm and he was like, oh my God, all the pain is gone, right? So neither one of us was expecting that. And even though I was completely clueless, I was still creating outcomes for people. So I developed a little process of finding loud spots, and that was what I did. And actually for 10 years, I did this as a hobby. And I'd see maybe one or two people a week, if that. People would just sort of find me through being recommended to me. And that was all I did. I just kind of hunt around for the loud spots, bring them to the middle. And then I could feel like when I brought things to the middle that there was this sort of sense that they wanted to go that way too. So I'd bring things to the middle and then I would do that. So I never wanted to be a healer, and certainly not a tuning fork wielding healer, because of the way that people would respond in that skeptical way. I used to own a very busy restaurant that people loved. And then in 2004, I developed a kettle corn recipe. I actually got the first kettle corn in stores. Because back in 2004, you could buy kettle corn, which is that sweet, salty popcorn. You could buy it at fairs and festivals. There would always be long lines of people waiting for kettle corn. And I don't even really like popcorn, and I don't like standing in line. So I'd never actually even tried it. But I knew I wanted to start a specialty food company after I got out of the restaurant in 2002. So I'd go to grocery stores on Sunday nights, and I would look to see what people were buying, what people were not buying, and looking for a niche that was unfilled. And then one day it came to me that, wow, you can't get kettle corn in a store. And so I went out and I got a kettle and I started making organic maple kettle corn because I'm in Vermont. So of course maple was the way to go. And I made this stuff so delicious that when people opened a bag of it, they ate the whole thing. They just ate the whole thing. And so I grew this business over the course of 2 years to be in 50 stores. It was flying off the shelves. And I knew that I had great timing into the marketplace. I knew I had a great profit margin. Like I knew it was a proven product. And so I was ready to scale it, to automate it, and take it to the next level. Except that all of a sudden, that path that had been very easy started to become very difficult. And at the same time, I made a discovery which really changed everything, and then absolutely went on to shape the rest of my life, honestly. And that was that I was working with a woman who was in pain. She had a sense of pain and pulling in her jaw, her neck, and down into her shoulder. And she'd been to see an osteopath, a chiropractor, an acupuncturist, massage. Like nobody had been able to solve this problem for her. And so I was working on her doing what I do, which was holding the fork right over that area and listening to it, when a very fateful thing happened. I heard a very loud sound out my window. And I lived at that point on 93 acres in the middle of the mountains in Vermont. There was nothing and nobody around me. So I went and I looked out the window and I didn't see anything. But for whatever odd reason, as I was walking back to her, I activated the fork from like 4 feet away and started moving in towards her body with an activated fork. And when I got to be about 2.5 feet away from the side of her body, the fork flared up and got loud. And then it settled down again. And I paused and I was like, that was a loud spot. But what is that loud spot doing all the way over here? And so I went back and I investigated it. And sure enough, there was an area about the size of my hockey puck where the fork got really loud. And so I stood there for a moment and I wasn't really sure what to do about it. But then I realized that I'd been bringing all the loud spots to the middle. So I might as well just do that. And it felt very odd to click, drag, and drop a spot from that far away, but it did it. And I brought it all the way to the middle of her throat and dropped it in. And then it got really loud there. And then it was kind of all quiet out there. And I thought, wow, that was really odd. So the next day she called me and she said, Eileen, all of that pain and pulling is gone. And so that was very curious to me. And so the next people who started coming in, I started exploring the atmosphere around their body. And what that led to, over the course of the next 4 years, I would go on to map the biofield. And that's a central part of my work is called the Biofield Anatomy Map. And that is that just like we all have pretty much the same anatomy and physiology inside our bodies, we all have the same anatomy and physiology in our fields. So what I observed, and this came to me in a very interesting way. So I would be combing through the field and I would hit a spot where I felt a sense of resistance and where the tone became discordant, dissonant in some way. And as soon as I hit these places, I would get what I call a note in my mail slot, M-A-I-L. So I had the sense that I had like a little trap door in the base of my skull, right at the top of my spine. And it would open like a little mail slot, and a little note would come in, and it would drop in. And it would say something like, sadness, age 10. And I would say to the person I was working with, did something really sad happen when you were 10 years old? And they would say, yes, that's when my grandmother died and we were really close and we never talked about it and it was really sad and I still miss her to this day. And so on and on and on like that, I would hit these areas and this note would drop in. Now, where was it coming from? I don't know. I don't really subscribe to things like guides or, I'm very much a scientist, right? I'm not going to be like, oh, that's that or that's that if I don't know, right? So to me, it was just a mystery and I was willing to just let it be a mystery, but it was always correct. It was always correct. And so over the course of having these notes drop in, I started to observe a pattern I started to notice that every time I found a sad memory, I found it off the left shoulder. And I found that almost without exception, people who came to see me who had sore left shoulders had an accumulation of unexpressed sadness in the field around that shoulder. And when I combed through and worked with it and got whatever was there to settle down and relax and release, then that pain would go away. I discovered every time somebody had an angry memory, it was off of the side of their right solar plexus. I discovered that everybody who came in who had sore right hips had a busy mind and a busy body. They were always go, 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 do, 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 right? Anybody got a body part that's in pain that you want to know what it's related to? Yeah. Gentleman in the blue coat and the beard, yeah.
Want me to say something?
Yeah, do you have an ache somewhere, ache or pain somewhere?
Well, I've had 2 hips replaced and a shoulder replaced. Those are okay, but now my left shoulder is medically ready to be replaced.
Yeah. So that is a sign of someone who keeps soldiering on despite difficulties. So I would say you've probably had a lot of difficulties in your life, probably a difficult childhood. You've had to work hard, and you've had to take care of other people. You've had to do a lot of caretaking for others, and that you have denied yourself and that you have soldiered on as a good soldier. Does that make sense?
I'm laughing because he is a professional caretaker.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all indications of putting others' needs ahead of your own and just, powering through. Yeah. I suppose that makes sense, right? Yeah. Who else? I saw another person in the middle row there.
A whole room of hands.
Amy, right?
Yeah, the lady in the green with your hand up.
Yeah, actually my whole left side.
Yeah, your whole left side. I mean, very often our left side, this is the left side represents more of the inner feminine, right? So I also observed that there are what I call ditches in the field. There's the left-hand ditch or the right-hand ditch. So the left-hand ditch is a consequence of all the emotions that are up the left side. So feeling stuck in our lives and not seeing how to get ourselves unstuck. Sticking to containment of the devil we know. So we need to have containment. We need to have a roof over our head. We need to have companionship. We need to have a way to make money. And very often people will stay in situations that are not good for their soul, but they're familiar. And so we'll hold on to that. This all leads to a feeling of frustration over unmet needs, powerlessness, sadness, a tendency to internalize our feelings. So it's a kind of pulling in a yin or wet aspect of ourselves. That tendency can get started in childhood if our mother was a difficult character, if she was not a source of nourishment, love, affection, constancy, but rather something that we found ourselves having to protect ourselves against. And so from a very early age, that pattern of pulling in on our left side can start to become set in as a pattern, especially if our needs weren't met in early childhood. And so then we would develop the right side, the protector, the soldier, the one that like carries on and manages to find a way to be functional, even though this other part of us is in a contracted state. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then the right hand, issues with the right hand, this is a tendency to speak but not be heard. So this is more hot, it's more yang, it's more masculine. Speaking and not being heard, over caretaking for others to the point of resentment, anger, the hot emotions like guilt and shame and unworthiness that often drive us to overdo. And so there's a lot of overdoing and overcompensating that happens on the right side of the body. Yeah. Yeah, in the back there.
My right eye and like above my eyebrow in my right eye.
That's interesting. Well, the right side of the head, remember that the right hemisphere of the brain controls the left side of the body. And so that's on the more inward. So the right side of the head deals with issues of being reflective. And oftentimes when we're reflective, it's in a way of being guilty. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have eaten that. Why did I do that? Why didn't I do that? Right? That sort of like guilt inducing reflection of unworthiness. So that's that part of the biofield anatomy. And if that's a tendency for you, if you're running that kind of thinking, you're literally pulling energy out of your body and into that part of your field. So what I'm finding is essentially mental and emotional imbalances, because in this model of the biofield is a torus. It's like a bubble, an electromagnetic bubble, and it has a central channel down the middle. So our body is in the middle of the torus. And when we are in the present moment, then our energies are aligned. But if we are going to the past or going to the future or overindulging particular emotions, then our whole magnetic field gets shunted to one side or the other. Now, magnetic fields guide and inform electric currents. So the electric currents flowing through your body get pulled over to where the magnetic clump is, right? And so then that ends up with pain. Pain is too much voltage running through the wires. So that left shoulder, when you have an accumulation of sadness, it's pulling electricity over there. And that's what we're doing when we do an adjustment and we do click, drag, and drop to the center. We're guiding the electricity to go back into the way it flows properly. So with this, it might be a consequence of this mental tendency, right? So the antidote to that is you got to keep bringing yourself back to the present moment. I shared with Mateo at the last Spirit of Music camp, Mateo and all the audience, this new book that I'm working on called The Stabilizing Statements. And each side of each zone has a statement that goes with it. And the statement that goes on this side where you have that is, all is well. All is well. And that way you're not perseverating or ruminating or fussing or thinking it should have been different. You're just like, everything happens that needs to happen. And you know, we can always do when we do something shameful or when we recognize that we could have done better. All you have to do is write a little note to yourself. Self, next time when this sort of circumstance arises, remember to do it better. And then there's no guilt, there's no me. There's no reflection, there's just like lesson learned, onward, right? Just bring yourself back into now. Does that make sense for you?
Totally.
Yeah. See, this is the thing about the biofield anatomy is that it always, whatever is going on in your body is going to reveal an imbalanced tendency in thought or feeling that you've just gotten in the habit of, or maybe it was modeled for you, right? For me, exploring the biofield and starting to understand the biofield anatomy was an incredible reflection in my own dysfunction, because I would see these patterns in other people and I'd be like, oh, I do that. Oh, I do that too. Oh gosh, I do that as well. And so seeing how easy we can go out of balance and what brings us out of balance really taught me so much about what it means to stay in balance. But it's not easy because we don't have a lot of examples of it. I often ask, like, how many people's parents modeled effective emotional management? Yeah, right. No one. No, in all honesty, only one person has ever answered that question.
We've got
Yay. But for the most part, I think, in our generation, we have this expectation of ourselves to just like do things right and be good. And then we get frustrated or ashamed when we're not. But we forget that we haven't had that modeling. That it's only in the last 30 or 40 years that the tools to start to become functional, better functioning humans together have really become available to us, right? So we live in a very interesting time where we have the resources at hand to sort ourselves out and start to bring ourselves into our potential, So is there anybody else who had a body part that they wanted some insight on? Yeah, gentleman in the back there.
Ask you about, you've spoken about pain being an indicator. In other words, where is the pain? Do you also look at dysfunction? For example, my left eye doesn't focus as well as my right. In fact, it's significantly less. So does that show up for you in the same way in your explanation?
Yeah, it can be sort of a subpar functioning of any kind, right? It can be rashes, it can be misfiring of some kind, or underperformance like your eye. So on that side of the head, the tendency is towards always thinking about the future, running to-do lists, being concerned about finances, thinking about conversations you're going to have, any kind of tendency to be always projecting into the future. So, that is the imbalance. Now, is it related to your eye? Maybe. Is that a tendency that you have? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think most of us have an inner taskmaster, and those to-do lists are always kind of running. Yeah. How about the little guy in the back?
This nostril gets clogged with boogers, and this one doesn't.
Interesting. Like all the time, or just sometimes, just right now? So is it your right nostril or your left nostril that gets clogged?
Right.
Right. Well, the nose and mouth can often relate to the throat as well, right? Because when you go to a doctor, they're like an ear, nose, and throat, right? And that all kind of gets tied together. So I would say the nose is tied to the mouth, which is tied to the throat. So the right side of the throat can become imbalanced when we're not listening to ourself, we're not listening to our own conscience and making sure we do the right thing. Right? Because we all have a conscience. We all have a little voice inside our head that is trying to guide us to do the right thing, to do the best thing, to not lie, to not cheat, to not steal, to not be mean, right? All of that. So it's important to listen to our conscience. But then it can also go into feeling like you're not heard. So the imbalance going into the right side of the neck is feeling unheard. So you might be saying, I don't want to go to school, Mom. And Mom's saying, yeah, but you need to go to school. And you're like, yeah, but I really don't like school and I really don't want to go to school. Right? So then that leads you to feel like you're not being heard while you're expressing what your truth is. Yeah. So that.
Homeschool him all the time.
He's homeschooled all the time. Is that what you said?
For that, all the time.
Oh, he's asking to be homeschooled. Yeah, I mean, which is right, because school is a toxic environment. We're not designed to be under fluorescent lights, inside all day, doing small movements with our bodies. Kids are made to be outside. They're made to be running around, and they're made to be learning things that are valuable in the process of being human. We really need to rethink education. Now that we have AI, a lot of the stuff that's being taught in school is not necessary. And a lot of what is necessary, people are figuring out and doing, So I get it. I wish that I could have homeschooled my kids. I couldn't. So maybe you can't, Mom. But I would say your little guy is here to help rethink how and what we need to give our kids. And I think it's important to listen to him. Yeah. To the best of your ability. Yeah, gentleman in the white shirt.
Similar to the lady shared previously about the left side, everything that has ever happened to me, starting with a broken toe, all the way up, new knee, new hip, bad shoulder, most recently 2 full-on face plants in parking lots. No hands, nothing planted.
Wow. Oh my goodness. All right side. Yeah. Yeah, so again, just like the tendency with the left side and the mother, that can be the right side and the father. If your relationship with your father was difficult, if he was a difficult character, there's certain things that we need from our fathers that many of us never get, right? And that is to be really seen, like I see you, I appreciate you, and I love you. Like those are attention, affection, and acknowledgement. I mean, did you get those things from your dad? No, I mean, very few people actually do. And what I've observed, it's interesting because there's specific areas in the biofield that hold the energy of our mother and our father. So about 10 inches off your solar plexus, on the left side, again, there's a spot that's about the size of a hockey puck that's off the solar plexus that holds the energy of your mother. And then on the right side, your father. And I can stick a tuning fork in those spots and I can tell you all about the personality of your mother and the personality of your father and the quality of the relationship between the two of you. I also discovered, and this was a number of years in, that there are these features that I call the ancestral rivers. And these are currents or a sense of flow that comes down either side of our body and passes right through those mother and father spots. And they hold what I call the song of your DNA. The song of your ancestors is accessible in these rivers. And so when I put a tuning fork in the ancestral river, let's say on your father's side, I can hear where the function, the dysfunction. If somebody comes from like a long line of alcoholics, boy, can you hear that? Like there's a very particular sound there. And so what I observed was that, I think we all grew up with this idea of Freud and like, oh, mom's a problem, right? But what I found as I investigated this more and more and more with my clients, that dad was a much bigger problem than mom in most cases. The dad was either not there, or he was violent, or he was drunk, or he was emotionally distant, or he was completely dysfunctional in some way or another. So you end up with generations of dysfunctional men that just inform us and our being. And if you have like difficult energy coming from your father from that lineage, I think that when we don't get acknowledgement and affection from our fathers, we often end up kind of approval seeking in our lives. That we end up overdoing, overcompensating, putting ourselves out of our own balance in order to find that approval that we never got, that acknowledgement that we never got. And so that can sort of pitch us into this imbalanced masculine expression. So does that make sense for you? Yeah. Yeah, and then emotions of resentment, anger, worthiness, being blocked moving forward, like those are all some of the things that we kind of bump up with here. Yeah. Good. All right. Blue shirt again?
Yeah, so I noticed that in a lot of healing type modalities, like you're I'm trying to put this question together. You're mentioning things about dysfunction and all kinds of other things that I think we all can say would raise our hand. Do you feel this? Do you feel that? But it only manifests like in certain people in certain ways. What's the function of that?
Well, I think it's duration and intensity, honestly. I think that the more that something is overindulged or fed, the more likely it is to create a problem, right? So I'll just give an example. A lot of us are overthinkers and overdoers, but are we perseverators, right? And so I worked with a woman who was a runner, and she had right hip pain. And so I'm in and I'm listening off of her right hip, and I can feel and hear this mental loop that she's doing. Because what she's doing every day many, many times during the day is she's perseverating on whether she should leave her husband now or wait until her son graduates from high school. Right? Now that is an unbalanced kind of future-oriented inclination, and she was perseverating in it. And so I was able to do an adjustment. Now, this is the sort of thing that we would call psychosomatic pain, because there was nothing wrong with her hip joint. There was nothing wrong with it. It was purely an energetic imbalance. And so when I discovered what was going on and I did the adjustment, and I told her what was creating that and advised her on not perseverating, and she went out for a run the next day and it was gone. Right? So it is, if you have this tendency, another story. I have a girlfriend who's a single mom. She's a massage therapist. She owns a massage therapy school. And at the time, she was being an adjunct professor at 2 colleges. This woman was always overdoing for others. And she called me one day and she said, Eileen, I was out hiking and I fell and injured myself. Where do you think I injured myself? I said, your right shoulder. And she said, yep. So we tend to get injuries and accidents in places where we are mentally and emotionally imbalanced. Yeah.
So that would also, could also be the reason why, I mean, the pain is caused from arthritis, right? So would these imbalances then cause the arthritis and?
Yeah, I mean, arthritis in my experience is just the mental body forcing the physical body to keep going even when the physical body says stop. And so it's a denial of self and a taking care of others that creates unnatural wear and tear in the body. So, arthritic hands, when hands do that, that is someone holding themselves to a task even when the body is like, I've had enough. And so you end up with this just overworking of what is sensible or appropriate for the body. Yeah, the self-denial. Yep. Good. Lady in the back, the gray sweater.
What role do implants have on the energy field? Like metal or a pacemaker or?
Not much. I mean, they don't get in the way of me being able to do sessions. They're not contraindicated. With a pacemaker, I wouldn't put a weighted fork right on the pacemaker. I wouldn't necessarily use a lot of weighted forks on a joint, especially one that's fresh. But they don't get in the way. I can do regular tunings with people, even if they have artificial joints or pacemakers. Yeah. I see a hand over there on the right side of my screen, behind the guy in the white shirt.
I'm not gonna touch the computer.
Okay, so curious to me, for years I had pain in my left hip. It was a constant thing, and it's better and stuff, but as of, I would say the end of last year, I focused on my right hip.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that I've observed is that sometimes where the pain isn't where the structural problem is. So that can definitely happen. But just basically, the left hip relates to frustration over unmet needs. And again, it often goes back into childhood. For example, I worked with a lot of baby boomer women in my practice, and they all had the same patterns. They were, many of them were bottle fed on a schedule, and they weren't held or they didn't get skin to skin contact. And when they did finally get fed, it was formula. A lot of them got Caro syrup with condensed milk. And so that starts a pattern of, I'm frustrated that my needs aren't met. Nobody is listening to me, so I must not be worthy. And then a habit of consoling with wine or sweets. And And so that frustration over unmet needs very often in people goes all the way back to infancy, that it starts off as a habit in infancy. And then it also goes hand in hand because we see things go across the body. So the tendency in the right hip for busy mind, busy body is often a consequence of avoiding sadness. As long as my mind stays busy, as long as my body stays busy, this feeling of sadness is not going to settle down on me, right? So this is what we see in that way. Whereas the right hip or the right shoulder and the left hip is I'm going to take care of everybody else's needs because mine don't get met. And I just resign myself to that. So it very often also correlates to what I call the posture of victimhood, where we get all kind of scrunched down in the left side of our solar plexus, which is powerlessness, frustration, unmet needs. And then we become a victim and someone else becomes a villain because they're not listening to us, and that becomes our story. I remember discovering the posture of victimhood one day when I was traveling. I was on the road in California, and I was talking to my husband who was home in Vermont, and I was feeling unheard by him, and feeling like a victim and feeling like he was being a perpetrator. And then I became aware of my inner energetic posture. And I realized that I was all scrunched down into this left hip and coming from that place. And in that moment, I decided that I was going to like straighten up and fly right. And I reorganized my inner energy onto my midline. And I stood up straight, and then I looked at the situation from that perspective. And I spoke from that perspective. And it completely changed everything in that moment. Right? So we end up with these arrangements or these habits or these stories that just perpetuate out into the world around us. And it's always very easy to blame other people, but ultimately at the end of the day, we are responsible for how our energy is organized and how it is expressing and how it is interacting with other people. Yeah.
So, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, did that make sense for you?
Especially the posture of victimhood.
Yeah, it's a good thing to know about because you'll catch yourself in it. and all you really need to do is just straighten yourself up. You know, as adults, as children, we were victims of, neglect or abuse or whatever. As adults, we don't have to be. And a lot of it is just coming from wiring. It's wiring. It's just how our electrical system got wired, and now it's just become a habit. But it's all very mutable. Like we can really change this. I mean, I talk about being like a bioelectrician, and I help get your wiring in order, and that helps bring you to a more neutral, centrally organized place where then you can start to expand out into the potential that you know that you have. Like one of the things that I discovered too that was so amazing to me was that with everybody, like without exception, when I would do a session with them and get the noise out of their signal and amplify their harmony, what it brought to the fore was the fact that this person was beautiful, brilliant, amazing, gifted in all of these just amazing ways. And I would reflect back to them. I would say, wow, like you are just amazing and brilliant and beautiful in this way specifically. And they would look at me shyly and be like, I knew that. We all know our brilliance and our greatness. We know it. How many people actually reflected back to you and honor it, right? And the only thing that's getting in the way of you living that is you believing in it and the noise that's in your signal, which isn't even your fault. You know, a lot of it is cultural, familial, a consequence of our own trauma. You know, we're all in a way like beautiful Stradivariuses that have been terribly mishandled, and we're just out of tune. We don't need to go out and get anything or be more. You're already everything and you're already amazing. And you just need to believe that and then, get some help getting your instrument back in tune. Yeah. The lady in the white sweater in the back.
I wanted to know why the body doesn't many bodies I know don't absorb proper minerals and vitamins. And then my other one is back in nerve pain down the leg.
Okay. So the ability to absorb minerals. I think a key thing that I figured out, and I don't know that I've ever really come across an exception to this, is that at the kernel of every dysfunction that I've ever found in anyone, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, relational, situational, whatever it is, at the core of that imbalance was a belief that they were not worthy. That they were not worthy. You know, if you want to make someone feel powerless, make them feel guilty. And certainly the church has done that. Like parents have done that. Teachers have done that. There's been many, many forces in our lives, Madison Avenue, that tell us that we are not enough, that we are not good enough, that we are not worthy. And then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we shut down the receptors that would allow us to receive the healing, receive the nutrients, receive the love, receive the money. And many of us, if we grew up in a home that was where people were putting down what we didn't want to pick up and couldn't get away from it, we learned to disassociate and to shut down our receptivity. And so that goes all the way into your diet and your ability to absorb nutrients. If you don't have the receptors open, you're not going to receive anything. So it can also be a consequence of, like I remember working with someone who was fed soy formula as a baby, and he was violently allergic to soy, and somehow they didn't connect his vomiting and his stomach difficulties to the soy formula they were feeding him. And it really, really messed up his digestion and his whole relationship with food as an adult. So, you know, things can come from insults to the system that happened previously. But for the most part, most of us simply don't feel worthy of being beautiful, brilliant, healthy, rich, free, hot. Do you know what I mean? Like we're like, oh no, like no, not me. I'm not worthy. And pretty much all health issues, you know, because God is right there, right? You know, what is it in the Sistine Chapel, and God's extending his finger, you know, and Adam's like, yeah, right. It's up to us to like receive God. Because God is always giving. The life forces are all around us. It's accessible through our breath, through the water we drink, through the thoughts we think, all of that. Like, how much God can you let into your body and your mind and your spirit and truly feel worthy of being filled to the brim with vitality, right? That's a pretty audacious concept for a lot of us. Yeah. And then the nerve pain down the back of the leg, if it's the left leg, again, it goes into that sort of frustration over unmet needs, can relate specifically to the home, you know, having your home be uncomfortable or not meeting your needs in whatever way. Whereas if it's on the right side, again, it can relate to home, and feeling like you're going and you're doing so much, but you're still not getting where you want to go. Yeah. Good. Okay. I saw the lady in the brown right in the middle there. Yeah.
Thank you. This is a spectacular package of information. I so appreciate it. Is there a favorite training board that you work with? Or do you shift in a situation that you sense from a biofield?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the forks that I make, you know, for years people would ask me if you could do this on yourself. And, you know, my particular brand of trauma that I grew up with made me extremely focused on other and not on self at all. And so for many, many years, it was all about everybody else. And I would be like, you can't really do it on yourself. Of course, that's not true because you can do it on yourself. It just took me a while to feel worthy of spending the time just taking care of me instead of, ministering to everyone around me. That was it's a hard lesson, especially if, I know for me, that tendency was a consequence of a trauma where basically everybody, both my parents sort of fell apart all at once. And I ended up becoming at age 10, the energetic, emotional, and physical caretaker in my family. And so I had to make sure that everyone around me was okay, in order for my needs to get met. Right. So that has propelled me into decades of over caretaking. And so I developed a tuning fork that I called a sonic slider. So this is it. It's a weighted tuning fork, and it's based in the Schumann resonance, the Earth's natural background electromagnetic pulse, which is around 7.83 hertz. Now you can't make a 7.83 hertz tuning fork. Because, there you go. Look, you just manifested one. Because it would be like 4 feet long. So that one is a 7.83 times 12. So it has the Schumann resonance embedded in it. So what you do to activate it is you just bump it against the heel of your hand, or you bump it against the side of your knee, or even like the chair arm or whatever. And then you just place it on your sternum. Just really simply, just put the vibrating fork on your sternum. And then just like in the beginning, when I was activating the 222, it kind of calls your body to attention. Your body all of a sudden is like, whoa, what's going on there? Right? And so just simply hanging out, and you can do different things. So if something is overactive, if it's achy or sore or hot or inflamed, you want the fork to be sedating. And so you would let the vibration run down all the way. Whereas if something is like underactive or you're tired or low energy, then you would keep on activating the fork and keep on sending that strong vibration in. Now, when I first developed the sonic slider, I actually developed it to use just like on the face. I had it made with an extra long handle. I was in my 40s. I'm starting to see age and kind of horrified. Not the kind of gal to get Botox. So I originally just created it to use on the face. But then I started using it on the body, like dry brushing, if anyone has ever used dry brushing. And what I found was it got my lymph moving, it got my blood moving. I was kind of like water weight, sort of puffy as a consequence of tension, right? Because not only did my parents have that issue when I was 10, but I'm the youngest of 6, and my siblings are 6 to 12 years older than me. And routinely, daily in my childhood, I was pinned down and tickled. I was come after for Indian rope burn and camel bites. I was flicked with rat tails. I was teased. So I grew up in an environment where I was constantly under attack, and I was constantly doing this. Yeah. And so I had all of this fascia binding that was inhibiting fluid flow through my body. And when I started using the sonic slider, it started to iron out and open up my fascia flow. And I lost like 10 pounds of water weight in a pretty short amount of time. I had no idea that it was tension that was keeping that water weight on me, right? But people have also discovered all kinds of things. There's something about this particular frequency, and not all frequencies are created equal, right? I've created dozens and dozens and dozens of prototypes over the years to play with, to experiment with, to explore. And we use 10 forks in Biofield tuning. We use 5 weighted forks and 5 unweighted forks. And every single one of those forks has been thoroughly vetted by me with the observation that this frequency is useful, and it's useful in this way. So this one is 7.83 times 12. Well, I tried 7.83 times 11. And that one was like, it was deadening. It kind of like, bleh, like knocked you out. It was not a pleasant frequency. I tried 7.83 times 13, and it was completely neurotic. It was like, it's not a pleasant frequency. But this one really is. You can use it on bug bites. You get a mosquito bite, you just activate the fork, put it on the mosquito bite, let it run all the way down, and it will stop itching. You can use it on burns. People have healed burns faster. They've healed injuries faster. And what is neat is a couple years ago, I came across a study from Harvard that determined that mechanically stimulated tissue heals 2.5 times faster than non-stimulated tissue. Okay, well, what is this but mechanical stimulation, right? And so you don't need to go out and spend a lot of money on fancy devices that you plug in, because you can get this mechanical stimulation in this acoustic tool. So, so we have scientific, backup to what we've already observed out in the field, that this fork helps you to heal faster and feel better. And it even, for some people, it tones muscles, it tightens skin. Some people lose weight. Not everybody does, because everybody's different, right? So if you were just going to get like one fork for personal use, we want like a sonic slider in every first aid kit in every home, because it can settle down if, from upset. It can just help with so many things. And I love that so many people are out there discovering all the different ways that they can use it. So that's a really useful tool for self-care. Yeah.
One quick question. What about for the use on your pets, on your dog or cat?
Yeah. Well, I've been sent so many videos of people using the sonic slider on their dogs and cats. So many. Cats are very vibrationally discerning as generators of vibration themselves. And cats absolutely love it. And most dogs do too. And I've had many reports from people who have used it on arthritic dogs and that sort of thing, and found that it was helpful for that. When it comes to the unweighted forks, not all animals like the unweighted forks. With dogs, they're either curious or they run away. But I do often find, if I'm giving someone a session remotely, because I do sessions over Zoom, that their cats will come and join them. So even if people are listening to some of my audio recordings, their cats will come and join them, even if they're listening through headphones. So cats are definitely attracted. And I used to have my dog Jed, and he would, when I had an office at home, he would only come into the treatment room and lie down if we were processing something like heavy grief. If I was in someone's field and we were in a place of, oh God, that's when I lost my blah, 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 and they were really in their emotion, he would come in and lie down on the floor next to the bed, just to provide additional support. So they're very astute, and they definitely understand the language of vibration. So this is another piece that I haven't really talked about, and that is that I started to discern that the tuning forks were communicating a language to me. And that when the tone would change and the pitch would change, the timbre would change, the quality of the overtones and undertones would change, that it was reflecting an emotion and an emotional memory. Like when I talked about the sadness, right? Sadness, age 10. Well, the fork sounded sad to me. In fact, it was the very first emotion that I identified in this language of vibration. I think in part because I had so much sadness in my life, and so much sadness and I had an eating disorder. I was a sugar addict, and then I was bulimic, and then I was even when I stopped purging, I was still a binger, and I had a very hard time weaning myself off of using food in an addictive way. And every time I had felt sad or felt angry, I had buried it under brownies or ice cream or what have you. So I had all this sadness like tucked in hidey holes all in my body that had never been felt or expressed. So I really resonated with the feeling of sadness, right? And then I was able to identify anger, resentment, frustration, guilt, shame, like all jealousy, like all the different emotions that we feel are different shaped and size waveforms moving through our bodies. Interestingly, one of the last emotions that I came to recognize is actually one of the easiest to recognize for new people, and that is fear. So fear has a pulsing quality to it. And we know when we get really scared that movement of that wave through our body causes us to shake, right? Or they think about the Jaws soundtrack. So it's got this like kind of quality that you can hear in the fork. anxiety and excitement and fear are all kind of in the same tonal family. Now, even though I, had lots of sadness, I did not have much fear. I'm a pretty fearless person. I started traveling around the world by myself when I was 16. I was just like taking off on trips all over the place. I spent 8 months in Europe by myself when I was 18, completely fearless, not afraid of other people, not afraid of situations. So because I did not recognize fear in myself, it took me a really long time to recognize fear, to recognize and understand. I'm like, oh, that sound is fear. Then I discovered that animals speak the same vibrational language as people. That's how your dog knows, when you're sad. Dogs don't just smell your fear. They sense your vibe and they know it because fear is the same vibe in them that it is in you. In fact, I even had the opportunity to do some tune-ups on plants that were hooked up to a polygraph machine in the University of Colorado. And much to my surprise, one of the plants was exhibiting fear. And it was the same brrr kind of thing that's in people. And so when I said that to the researcher, he said to me, oh, we had a really good psychic who works with the Colorado State Police Department. She's really good. She was in here just a few days ago and she told me that plant was afraid. Right? So this vibrational language that the tuning forks reveal to us is a universal language that is totally pure. Nobody can lie to me when I've got my forks in your field because truth has a ring. Everything is in the field. Vibes can't lie, right? So learning this language of vibration has been so mind-opening to me, and realizing, that my houseplant, if I were to have the thought, I'm going to go over and light a match on that plant's leaves, it would get ah. It would be afraid. It would sense my intention and it would respond in this vibrational pattern. So that opens up, I know how sometimes people think animal communication is a big deal. It's not. When you tune into an animal with the forks, you can immediately tell what they got going on, what they're thinking, and communicate with them on that level. Maybe some of you have been listening to that new podcast that's really popular called the Telepathy Tapes, and about how these autistic kids are communicating telepathically. That is how we're built. We can communicate telepathically with nature around us, with the animals, with everything. We all have that capacity to do that. Yeah. Good. Lady with the blue, right there.
I just want to thank you, first of all, for bringing this wisdom and knowledge to light. And when you just were talking about the truth, I feel like that's what you're sharing. That's what I know to be true as a musician and someone who's been experimenting with sound for over 40 years. I was fortunate to listen to Valerie Hunt speak, who wrote Infinite Mind, and Valerie, did you know Valerie?
I do. Yeah, I met her once before she died.
So back in I don't even remember. I don't know. Anyway, she had done a presentation where she was showing the field that she was doing at the time. She had this work that she was playing different kinds of music and hooking it up to emotional conditions and filming the field of people. And that was not Curlian photography or anything like that. And that I cried through her whole presentation because it was something intuitively that I knew. Nobody talked about it. And so I want to thank you for, bringing forth this information, because I know it's true and I've been sharing it for a long time, the truth of sound and vibration. But I love your scientific approach, but you have such beautiful information that you with your mailbox. And so I just want to thank you. I just am so grateful. So I applaud you.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, I've had to become scientific because of the way that tuning fork healing lands on skeptics. And how there is a percentage of the population who's been very programmed that when they hear anything about vibration or energy, that they get this wall up and they're like, that's hippy dippy nonsense. right? Like and even I felt that way about tuning forks. I'd see other people with tuning forks. I'm like, oh God, what hippy dippy nonsense. And then I'm like, why me? Like, why do I have to be like, want to go out and talk about tuning forks? Because I encounter that, and I encountered it in myself. That same, I don't know where the programming comes from. I don't know why people have been subconsciously programmed to feel this way, especially about tuning forks, but it's a thing. And so I've had to work very hard to understand the science, to form a hypothesis about how and why it works. I remember not that long ago, my husband and I were at some hotel bar, and we started chatting with the couple next to us. And she was one of those gals who was into Reiki and energy healing and, you know, crystals and stones and all that. And her husband was like a chemical engineer or something. And he thought that what she was just like clueless. You know what I mean? Just like there's this real arrogant superiority in that mindset that wants to like diminish and dismiss out of hand this, you know, energy sensitive perspective on life. And so within just a few minutes, I was able to explain the biofield, vibrational medicine, energy healing to him in a way that made sense to his scientific mind. And he was like, oh, now I understand. And his wife was like, I've been trying for 20 years to get it. And, you know, anyway, I ended up getting a text from her, I don't know, like a week or two later. And she was like, he's totally on board now. Like, you completely changed his mind in 5 minutes, right? So that is what I've had to learn how to do, you know, to jujitsu people in short order into realizing that it makes sense. Yeah. Lady in the back.
So I'd never heard of your work until Mateo told me about it, and I watched one of your interviews yesterday, and I've never touched a tuning fork, and yet I just put one to my sternum. I can still feel the edges of my spots, and I can still feel it. I'm curious what's going on.
Well, your body's mostly water, right? And so you know that if you have a dish of water and you jostle it, it'll continue to move. Those vibrations will continue to bounce around even after that movement stops. So, and also sound travels through water 4 to 5 times faster than it does through air. And your body is a closed container. And so once you put that vibration in, it can keep vibrating. Your body may keep resonating with it. Yeah. Good. Any other questions?
Oh gosh, you've opened us to the silence of awe.
What about you, Mateo? Got any questions or any things you want to share?
Yes. I mean, I'm so grateful to hear from everybody. You know, these times, like my biggest question is one for myself, but for us all. You know, I'm way over here. Yeah, the heart centered, and I think these are heart centered times for letting go, but then also inviting in the bravery to be yourself. So that's happening with myself, within relationships. And I know you do all kinds of different things from using our voice. I'm so excited about your new book, but yeah, you can just hear my voice if you have any suggestions. They know how brilliant you are.
Thanks, Mateo. Yeah, there's a whole other body of work that I do with voice as well. And this also came from, you know, my own desire for self-healing. When I was 20, I received very clear guidance from God that said, you need to learn how to sing. And I thought this was some kind of cruel joke because I was the kid who was always clapping on the offbeat in music class and squeaking my clarinet and singing off key. I was hopelessly non-musical, and I grew up in a non-musical family, and was always in awe of people who could like perform in musicals and things like that when going through school, because there was absolutely no way I could open my mouth and sing in front of people. So when you've probably all had the experience when you get guidance from God and you're like, Absolutely not. Right? We've all had those moments when we're like, no. But also when something is meant to happen, the guidance is very persistent. And I remember the scene in Harry Potter where the letters are coming down the chimney and in the windows, and like the message is, it finds its way into you. And so this guidance to go and learn to sing would not leave me alone. And so finally I relented. And I went to my first singing lesson, and the teacher was playing middle C on the piano, and she was asking me to just go, la. And I felt like I had hands around my throat. My palms started sweating. My knees actually started knocking, which had never happened to me before. And I couldn't make a sound. I started to sweat. And after maybe 10 minutes, I finally croaked out a sound and then burst into tears. And this poor woman was like looking up from the piano at me like she was so not equipped or prepared to deal with the fact that my childhood trauma had stolen my voice. Right? Tell mom and I'll kill you. Yeah. And so, and never mind all of that tension, right? That I had acquired. There was absolutely, you have to be so free to enjoy your singing voice. And I was so not free. And I didn't even realize it. And I had no idea. I mean, at that time, I didn't understand the depths of the abuse that I had suffered.
Oh man,
interesting.
that's interesting. Eileen, we lost your voice. And I have no idea what to do about it.
You can't hear me at all?
There you are. You're back now. Wow.
But you lost your voice.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's funny timing. Anyway, okay, I'm glad I'm back. So anyway, over the course of the next 7 years, I had 7 voice teachers. And the first 5 people told me that I was tone deaf and that I would never be able to sing. Have any of you ever been told you were tone deaf and would never be able to sing? Yeah, and then you probably believe them, right? But I'm sort of uniquely stubborn, and I persisted. And what happened when I got to the 6th teacher was that I started to receive body work and discovered just how clenched I was. In fact, this body worker discovered that my kidneys, which are supposed to sit like this, had actually tucked themselves up underneath my ribs from being tickled so much. And in Chinese medicine, a lot of us know that the liver and the eyes are related, but maybe less well known is that the kidneys and the ears are related. And so my kidneys were so clenched and so traumatized that there was so much noise in my signal that I couldn't hear through the noise in my own body. So I started receiving body work, I started doing yoga, I started doing meditation, and that's when I got my first set of tuning forks, the CDE, da-da-da. And so what I started doing was I'd take the C fork and I'd activate it and I'd press it against my ear like that, and hum. And that was how I taught myself the C scale, was with those tuning forks so that I could feel it. And then I was able to start to learn to hear it. So then I ended up with a little tiny band, and that my then friend, but who became my husband, was in. And we didn't perform or anything. We just had a space, and I would do spoken word and I would tone. And I was just starting to get into the groove of like, wow, I'm really getting my voice, and I'm going to answer this call that God sent to me. And, we're going to move forward with this whole singing thing. And then, music can be very energizing. It can be very sexy. And so I ended up with the percussionist becoming my husband, and I got pregnant unexpectedly. And then became very, very sick when I was pregnant. And so all of that went away. And I became a mom, and then the tuning forks took over, and I kind of, forgot all about the singing and music thing. But then back in 2019, God came back around and was like, Eileen, Okay, now I want you to take everything you've learned about the biofield, about sound healing, about intention, and I want you to come back to this music thing and take all of this and bring this to music and to voice. And that led me to these two Australian brothers named Isaac and Torald Corin, who are specialists in helping people overcome their fear of singing. And I started working with them, and we had an agreement that we were going to co-write and then record 2 songs as a process of like getting me over this hump. But because I really had such a terror of actually singing in front of people, even these guys, like, you could not ask for safer people to do this sort of thing with. I still had too much constriction to be able to actually sing songs in front of them. And so Torald has this full body instrument exercise where he gets you to bring your voice into your body and really make sounds from your body. And so we started doing that. And what I discovered was that I had all of these different pockets of tension. And so I'd go into my heart and maybe work that out with sound, but then that was like a wheel and pulley, and it would lead to some other place. And then we had to go there. And so this thing that he would usually do with people in 1 or 2 sessions, I managed to spread out for weeks and keep kicking that can down the road. And in the process of this inner exploration and sounding from these stuck spots, this whole body of work emerged that we did not set out to create. It's called the sonic anatomy. And between the 3 of us, we created or figured out or remembered, because it really felt like we were remembering it, 42 different tones that resonate in specific areas of the body. And we ended up creating a whole program around it called Sing the Body Electric. We released an album. It was not the album I thought I was going to make with them. It is an album of toning, but it's actually very moving and amazing. You can check that out at singthebodyelectric.com. And we lead people through these workshops. And I've been doing this for 4 years now. And I lead sing-alongs after we get people to all warmed up and with the tonings. It brought me over that finish line of really cleaning out all my stuck pipes. That's the way I look at it. Like, we're all like pipe organs, and depending on how much life shut us down, we have all of these stuck pipes. And this is a way of going in and sounding into your kidneys, sounding into your lungs, sounding into your feet or your knees, and cleaning out those pipes. And it is such a wonderful backdoor, easy entree into liberating your voice. Because here's the thing. Like, your voice is the thing that's most uniquely you, right? And I think so many of us are on this path where we want to feel free. We want to feel whatever that looks like for you, right? We want to feel liberated. We want to feel free to be our authentic selves. We want to feel free to express the full potential that who we are. That potential is in your voice. And if your voice is not free, you will not achieve that level of freedom that you are seeking. So what we've observed taking people through these workshops is that not only does their singing voice improve, but that's not really the goal of it. Not only does their voice improve, their ability to enjoy their voice, right? To enjoy their voice, but then it crosses over into their lives where suddenly they're speaking up for themselves where they haven't. They're setting boundaries where they haven't. They're sharing emotions where they haven't. They are coming into their power through this freedom in their voice. And so this combination of using the voice from the inside and tuning forks from the outside helps bring about this state of coherence and harmony and flow. And this leads to health. It leads to health and to vitality. So I'm going to be 57 this year. I don't have a single ache or pain. I don't have a single health issue. I have huge amounts of energy. I sleep really well. Like, all the things that you want, right? I've been able to achieve through sound. And this is coming from a place of not that, and I was just as broken and as dysfunctional, as sick as everybody else. And through my explorations with sound, I have really brought myself in that place I knew that I had, right? Into that potential. And I've been able to help bring other people there. We even have a training program in Sing the Body Electric called the Sonic Anatomy Guides Certification, where we train you how to facilitate others in liberating their voice. And certainly with biofield tuning, we train people to be biofield tuning practitioners. So I have a number of people who are out there who are both biofield tuning practitioners and sonic anatomy guides, who have experienced the benefits themselves and are helping other people to do the same. And, it's not that complicated. It's ultimately all you really need is your own voice, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
I have one more question. With all this cleaning up, waking up, that you've done for yourself, how is your relationship with
My relationship with what?
the natural world?
The natural world. I love that. I mean, obviously you feel connected, right? And this is part of that division of science and spirituality coming back to the beginning, where we're taught that everything is separate. That we're separate from each other, that we're separate from nature, that we're separate from God, that God is separate from nature. It is all this sort of divide and conquer illusion of separation. Ultimately, what all of this has shown me is that everything is light. Everything is vibrating light. Everything is God. And everything, and God's creation is in perfect harmony. And we see this in the way that nature flows, in the way that the stars move across the sky. The music of the spheres, the essence of life itself is perfect harmony. And it is only the lies that we've been told, the abuse that we've suffered, the noise and the signal that comes between us and our ability to experience that harmony and that connection within and out. And so I feel very, very connected to the natural world. At the moment, every time I go outside, oh gosh, there's one right there. Just as I'm speaking to it, a woodpecker landed in the tree, just as I was about to tell you about how I always see woodpeckers. Okay? That's how my life rolls. Like it's looking in the window at me, and it landed on that branch right before I was about to talk about them. So that alignment of within and without, or what Victor would call being in the pocket when it comes to music, being in the groove, right? That's what we're designed for. We're designed to be in alignment like this. And we can get back to it. It's our nature.
Thank you.
Much, Eileen. That was so beautiful. I know you've planted so many seeds for our internal growth.
Oh, yeah.
I know we're ready for round 2 soon.
Yeah.
I want to continue the gratitude that's flowing. It's just the room here feels so open-hearted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay. Good. Well, that felt kind of like a good note to end on. Mateo, can we do that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I've got I gotta get a bio break, and then I got my kids coming over. So
You're such a giver, and so I know you can go all day. And so thank you so much. Thank you. We have
yeah,
card we're gonna send you in the mail.
nice.
Gosh, I feel the community is so much better because of your presence.
Nice. Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thank you for your attention, and maybe I'll see you out there one of these days.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Yay. All right, everyone, stay well. Take care.
Yeah. Much love.
Bye.
Bye.